Good evening, everyone. A quick glance down to make sure that I've unmuted myself, my continual problem. Guys, welcome to Straight Talk. It's wonderful to have you back. This is the 74th episode. So next week, we'll have to celebrate the 75th milestone. I'm actually going to reverse things a bit tonight. I'm going to bring the panel on instantly and then explain why it's me and not Bob. But let's introduce your amazing panel tonight. It's got more gender balance than last week. So I'm delighted to bring in Sue Reed. Sue, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Yes, great down here in Masterton tonight.
Did you get a good dose of rain over the weekend for all those important farms?
No, it all went everywhere else in the Tararua, but really nothing here. But there are heavy rain warnings in the next 24 hours. So yeah, the garden's crying out for it.
Mine has been, but fortunately we got a good dose. Dr. Arte, lovely to have you along.
Hello, Lily. Greetings from warm Wellington.
A heads up, we've got a topic not specifically directed at you, but it's about GP waiting time, so you can prep your answers over the next 20 or 30 minutes.
Thank you.
Slightly in the darkness, but a man of light, Dr. Michael Reed, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Simon, and good evening, everyone.
Lovely to have you along. And then I think probably the furthest south, but not with his opinions, the indomitable Peter Williams. Peter, lovely to have you along.
Good to see you, Simon. Yes, coming to you live from, I was going to say sunny Central Otago. It has been today, but it will be again tomorrow, I'm sure, because it always is down here.
Well, look, there's a great advertisement. It's delightfully dark here in Auckland, but great light in and around me. Hey, to the panel, welcome. We've got an array of topics tonight, from the treaty to defence to GP waiting times and others. But for all of you joining us, and before the panel starts, look, first and foremost, you'll be going, where is Bob? And a number of you are probably part of the Bring Back Bob campaign. He will be coming back. There has not been a coup at Family First, but as some of you know, he's had a bit of an eye injury and he is still recovering. So we are, Bob, because I'm sure you are watching, all of us and those commenting send you our best wishes, and we certainly look forward to you retaking the helm of Straight Talk, among other shows. To all of you joining us across all the platforms which we broadcast tonight, know that if you want to comment, if you're on the Family First Facebook page or on Family First YouTube channel, it will come direct to me. And by direct to me tonight, that means on my little cell phone. So when you see my eyes going down, I'm doing my very best to see who is and isn't online. We have the lovely Philippa and Marita as well. To Lynette, lovely to have you along. We have Karen from Pikawai, Lynette from Christchurch. Lovely to have you guys along. So as I say, if you want to comment on anything the panel's saying, jump onto the Family First Facebook page and onto the Family First YouTube channel. We can see it live. So look, to the panel, there are so many contentious issues at the moment. I don't know where to start. But seeing I'm hosting it, I have to make a choice. And so we're going to start with the treaty bill. The treaty principles bill, first put forward by David Seymour. It's been contentious from day one. We've had the massive hikoi. But last week, the Justice Select Committee, which has been considering the 300,000 plus submissions, dropped the report early. In other words, they returned it to Parliament about 40 days early. They had not read all the submissions. They have come out saying that 90% of submissions are opposed and the rest clearly are not. And we anticipate, and I certainly do, that the second reading of this contentious bill will be this Thursday, as the government tries to get it off the agenda and off the discussion before the Easter recess. But I thought I'd just draw the panel and everyone's attention to particularly some of the comments from opposition, which, well, we'll put it to the panel, but do seem to be a little bit contradictory. So we have if I could put the first image up, this is from the Labour Party saying that the bill is, understandably to many, quite divisive. You don't have to read all the text, but they're saying it's very divisive and needs to be got rid of. We then have Chris Hipkins saying this on breakfast television.
This is the most radical reinterpretation of the Treaty of Waitangi in over 100 years. Even just getting to this point where the bill is being introduced as government policy has effectively undone decades worth of work to restore the relationship between Māori and the Crown. The whole treaty settlements process gets drawn into question by its introduction because, you know, the treaty settlements were all based on the law as it stood, and the government are now proposing to change that law. I think it's just such a massive step backwards for New Zealand, and unfortunately, even if the bill doesn't proceed beyond its first reading, the damage has already been done here. Just introducing it as government policy has done untold damage to what I think New Zealanders were quite proud of, that we had been making a lot of progress as a country.
So the early Labour Party clearly saying they don't want to have a bar of it, but in recent days, in this case, Labour Party MP Duncan Webb has come out and saying actually all the submissions should be heard. We should be spending more time hearing from everybody. In fact, he was talking to Ryan Bridge on, I think it's News Talk ZB, and said this.
Why do you want it to go on for so much longer if it's so dangerous and divisive? I don't understand. Wouldn't you want this thing to be wrapped up and done and dusted and out of everyone's hair?
Well, because when I went down and looked at those submissions that hadn't yet been processed, there were handwritten submissions from old people, there were intermediate schools with coloured drawings. Now, is it dangerous or not? That doesn't sound very dangerous to me. That sounds actually quite healthy. That sounds like a democracy. Were you wrong to begin with, Duncan? Yeah, no, and let's get the distinction right. I believe in democracy, which means that everyone.
Well, you didn't when this process started, did you? Because you said it shouldn't have happened.
The bill should not have happened. The bill is divisive.
So make it stop,
irresponsible.
Duncan. Make it stop.
I think it was irresponsible to introduce it. But once you start the parliamentary train rolling, you don't stop it halfway down the track. You let it run its course. And what the government parties have done here is they really don't like, well, the National Party doesn't like it as well. They're deeply embarrassed by it, so they want to move it along. But people deserve their say. Look, there was 20,000 Hobson's pledge submissions in there.
Yeah.
And they deserve to have their say as much as
Hang on a minute. Hobson's pledge. So you don't know if you're Arthur or Martha, Duncan. 1 minute it's dangerous. The next minute you're wanting to read Hobson's pledge.
I want everyone in New Zealand to be given a fair crack and a fair say.
I was going to start with Peter, but I've been watching your face. Sue. The various expressions. So what's going on here? Is this just political expediency around a contentious issue? Labour, and particularly the opposition, have been very clear we shouldn't be talking about this at all. But now that the submission results are out and it's going a different way, have they changed their tune, and why?
That was a very confusing interview with Ryan Bridge. I had to check, was that Duncan Webb, who's, not a friend of Conservatives or due process, to be honest. So he was very interesting, and he was all over the show. I think he was just trying to stay relevant and to keep Labor in the conversation and seem to be saying something. But it is a disregard for the select committee process. I am concerned that there have been not the time given and all the submissions presented, everyone who wanted to speak. This is not just a fly-by-night issue. This is a very pivotal point issue for New Zealand. And Christopher Luxon is just wanting this to be shut down. He wants it off, locked down, and nothing to see here and move on. But no, they're wanting to stay relevant and have an angle to it. So, but when you heard, probably diverting here a bit, Eru Kapakingi on Q&A and where he wants to take this, we've got to ask, as New Zealanders, we're saying, well, this treaty issue's come to light, and there's a lot of discussion here. He presented his vision for it and Q&A on Sunday with Jack Tame, with separate Maori parliaments, separate taxes and separate businesses, all sorts of things. It's separatism. So I think New Zealand is grown up to have and grown up enough to have these discussions. Christopher Luxon's done a disservice, but Duncan Webb, he's right in that. I hate agreeing with the guy, but there's got to be due process, and we can't just treat select committees as token consultation.
I'll inject myself in very briefly before I turn to Peter, but it is one of the ironies of the Toitu Te Treaty, which means together with the treaty, and that you get someone like Bukapa Kingi saying, actually, we want a whole lot of separatism. It's a fascinating insight. Peter, I know you've been writing actually several Substacks around this. What's your take about where the whole treaty principle bill has landed, where it is and is not heading? I mean, basically, it's an open check. What's your thoughts?
Well, for a start, I think Christopher Luxon has done a major disservice to New Zealand democracy. We were supposed to get 6 months of select committee hearings on this. We've finished up with about 4.5. All the submissions will go on the parliamentary record. Duncan Webb's interview with Ryan last Thursday, I think, jumped the gun just a little. James Meagher, the chair of the Justice Select Committee, came out the next morning, I believe, Friday morning, and told us, no, it was Wednesday, come to think of it. No, it was Friday. Came out on Friday morning and said exactly what the percentages of the submissions were for and against, and that the business committee at Parliament, it all got a bit complicated as to who blocked what and what couldn't be heard. But the crux of the matter is that Meagher, as the National Party chair of that select committee, has been told by Luxon to shut the thing down. Therefore, it comes back to the House this Thursday, will be voted down, and that's that. But just listening to Duncan Webb again, and he was the chair of the subcommittee that I submitted to back in February, Duncan Webb said that intermediate school pupils had made some submissions to the Parliamentary Select Committee. Now, I don't know about you, Simon. You've sat on a few select committees in your time. Have you ever come across intermediate school pupils making a submission? Who do you think put these 11 and 12-year-olds up to submitting to Parliament on the Treaty of Waitangi Principles Bill? It's disgraceful indoctrination and just an appalling reflection on what's gone on in our education system in recent times. 11 and 12-year-olds, frankly, have absolutely no right to be submitting to the Parliamentary Select Committee on a bill such as this. And just one other final point I'll make, which our friend Bob McCoskrie has made regularly recently. I think during the abortion debate of what year was that, 2020, there was something like 90% of the submissions that went to the Select Committee were against the proposed abortion legislation, but that didn't seem to make any difference. It went straight through. So it doesn't really matter, frankly, what the submissions say and the percentage for and against, because at the end of the day, it's the people who will decide. The submissions process can be hijacked, and it very obviously has been in this case.
Michael, turning to you, it's actually picking up on that whole submissions. As I say, about 300,000 plus submissions. Many now saying, look, the overwhelming majority are saying go in a particular direction. We've had journalists saying, therefore, because of this overwhelming majority, the Prime Minister should not only vote against it, as he says he will, but he should attend in person. But Peter's highlighted actually a really important issue that Bob has also noted. Hashtag bring back Bob. Just got to put that in any chance we can. Bob's noted, of course, in the abortion debate, the euthanasia debate, and many others, overwhelming support telling the Parliament to go in a particular direction, and yet it voted differently. I mean, what do you perceive as different this time? Or should the parliamentarians just be simply following what the submissions say?
Oh, well, Simon, I think Peter's point is a point well made. Let's just add, though, that the abortion bill went through under the cloak of COVID. You will recall that the country was gearing up for a lockdown with COVID restrictions, and the abortion bill just seemed to sail through at the same time. So what's going on here? Well, I think, Simon, it's politically safe for Labor now to come out and these U-turns, because the bill is dead in the water. We know that. So for Duncan Webb and others to be saying that, this is democracy in action, it's just so hypocritical in terms of what they were saying earlier on, which is the points you made, Sue. But it's safe for them to say this now. I think you're right, Peter, the absolute absurdity of 11-year-olds. I mean, who's putting them up to do that, to colour in the pictures and send that to the select committee? It's just bizarre, really. But Simon, I think, I guess Webb's right in as much as everyone should have their say and everyone should be heard. But the other side of the coin is that it seems a bit of a pointless exercise now, really. But the other thought that came to me, and it's probably a far-flung thought, is that possibly Labor's own polling within its own ranks suggests that there is actually some support for this, or for at least some revision of the treaty. But that's probably, that's probably, as I say, a bit far-flung. But it is a possibility, perhaps within Labor's own ranks. There are people who've quietly, or perhaps not so quietly, been saying to Hipkins and others, look, it's not everybody that's opposed to this thing, and there are even some of our members that would like something, some addressing of what the treaty means for today. So, yeah.
Do you think, Michael, and just quickly before I turn to you, Arte, but Michael, do you think we need to draw more attention to, as Peter and others have, if children are presenting to a select committee, we need to be asking who's in behind them, because they're not the ones having the faculties, for want of a better word, to be able to understand this. Should more focus be on who's behind this?
Well, I think we've got to see what Peter was saying in the context of what's happening in education, which is total indoctrination with prevailing left-wing views. And you've only got to look at the curriculum, the Ministry of Education, the Education Review Office, what's going on there. And it's not just secondary schools, of course, it's primary and right down to junior primary. So, yeah, we're not surprised with that, but you're absolutely right, Simon. We should be asking questions. What's going on there? Who's put them up to that? As Peter said, these children don't understand the issues. And so you've got to say, who are the adults, or ask who are the adults behind them, putting them up to this. But it was the same with the hikoi, wasn't it? Yeah. I mean, schools, there was an intermediate school in Wellington, wasn't it, that effectively said to its parent community, look, school's closed because we're all marching. Bizarre stuff, Simon.
It's the same with the climate change and so forth. And look, again, my observation is the host inserts himself into the conversation, can't help himself. Never be a good host on radio or TV, Peter. It was the same for climate justice. They seem to be very selective. Just quickly before I come to you, Arte, some of our people online, Lynn says we need a referendum. Ranesh says hello, which is great, Ranesh. Lovely to have you along. Rosie says it's a complete waste of taxpayer money. Philippa says there should not be any principles, and also it's very much hypocrisy from Mr. Hipkins. Craig notes it's only political point scoring. Another Rosie notes that kids have better things to do, and that they're not meant to be doing such protests, but instead maths and English. And Michael says the irony is consecutive governments in New Zealand appear to have little regard for submissions to Parliament. So Arte, is this really an invitation? Everyone's nodding their heads. I'm feeling worried now as a former MP. But Arte, do we need to go to referendum? I mean, at the end of the day, if 300,000 plus Kiwis felt strongly enough to write in, 11-year-olds or otherwise, is that a clear indication we should be having a referendum? And should the likes of Labour, the Greens and Te Pāti Māori be happy with that?
It would be an absolute waste of money and time to do a referendum. We have seen previous referendum, you do it and then the government just ignore it, just like all the other previous submissions, whether it's abortion, euthanasia, changing the birth certificate, banning of conversion therapy, all of that. They've just ignored it. So it's just an absolute waste of time. I think the other thing that's clear is we all know that 7 out of 10 people tend to agree on most things, but the media and the government want to send out a message to divide people. So it's the media and the government, Labour and Green, and then they want to just put out this narrative to cause people for people to think that we are being divided. We're not. I mean, the legacy of Labour, of course, with the pandemic, had divided New Zealand, but I think with regard to David Seymour and Chris Hipkins, they just want airtime. They don't give a damn. Laxon, he doesn't give a damn, but thankfully, most Kiwis, they're not drinking the Kool-Aid. They are just getting on with their lives and they don't believe this narrative.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Arte. If this actually went to referendum, do you think it would reflect what the Select Committee heard, or do you think there'd be a completely different result?
It may be different, but I mean, we've got so many other things going on. I mean, we're talking about health, education. Why would you spend taxpayers' money on a useless referendum?
And says me, you raise a good point, and this is probably a discussion for another time, is the whole notion of binding referenda. Because as you say, they're held and politicians tend to ignore them. Speaking of politicians who ignore things, there seems to be a politician in the Green Party at the moment. Here's the segue for you, everyone. Ignoring the media and the ability to actually front. So we have Benjamin Doyle, the Green MP, under a number of allegations, and I really want to stress that to viewers and listeners. There's a number of allegations, but he won't front. So here's just a few hints, if you will, of what's happening. This is something from The Centrist. Again, an open letter from Ian Wishart outlining a number of issues. The next slides will give you a bit of a hint of what these are. So these are some of his posts. So Benjamin Doyle's posts on a supposedly private account, well followed by many Green MPs. In this case, using emojis to, in this case, of a aubergine or an eggplant, which has got everything and nothing to do with vegetables. Other posts have him using terms like bussy, which is a portmanteau of boy and a certain part of the female genitalia. I'm trying to be as polite as I can tonight. I will quickly note on this one, the media, the mainstream media, are going overtime to suggest that the B in this word, bussy, refers to men. As someone else has pointed out, if that was the case, it would be mussy, but this is very clear, it's bussy, boy, and you know what. The next one, Benjamin sees to be very interested in using this emoji of a cyclone, which the FBI, as per on my right, perhaps your left, is used by people who predate on children. Again, nothing means that this is exactly guilty or wrong, but we're getting a bit of a picture developing here, and it sits all on top of a person who advocates for some rather disturbing ideas, as this video shows.
Interventions like puberty blockers and HRT are crucial to the well-being of the general population, trans and cisgender people alike. We know that access to surgery, therapy, mental health support and education for rainbow people is life-saving and therefore must be prioritised. That's why the Greens will increase funding for trans, reproductive and gender-affirming healthcare, decrease wait times for surgery, strengthen workforce development and capability and address discrimination in the healthcare system. Let's make HRT available to everybody who requires it and puberty blockers on demand. According to the census, the rainbow vote is 5% of the population, but we know it is more than that. Our vote can determine the next government. We will use our voice now and at the next election to make this a one-term government.
Amongst many things, quite extraordinary to be asking for the use of puberty blockers, regardless of what people think of them. We're very clear here at Family First, but highly toxic drugs to be just on demand. Anyone can get them, as you will, a Panadol. Michael, I'm going to throw you in this first. I mean, what's your take on the media? And I'm talking about legacy media here. Kudos to the likes of RCR, Family First on the platform, Centrist, who are actually following this. But our mainstream media seem to be avoiding this topic. Why? What's your perception or conception of why they are not addressing what seems to be a really significant issue of public interest?
Oh, well, Simon, I think we know the answer to that because they're in the back pocket of the current left-wing agendas, politically and ideologically. I just want to say that he's not using his voice now, is he? He was talking about using his voice, but we haven't heard from him. And of course, seeing Chloe Swarbrick and Marama Davidson, that they completely sidestepped the issues. They focus only on the consequences as it concerns Benjamin Doyle and his alleged safety. And they just completely failed. And the media is just pretty complicit. I mean, there were, I've seen, well, in one interview anyway, some critical probing questions were asked. But I think many young journalists today, they're certainly not like of Peter's generation, where they were taught and encouraged to probe and to go not just looking at consequences, but looking at causes. And the present mainstream media people are just simply not prepared to do that. They agree with all this perversity, and they don't want it. They don't want to report about it. Simple.
Ate, trying to keep the male-female balance going here appropriately. I mean, does it surprise you, building on what Michael said, that the media, the mainstream media, are reacting the way they are? And do you see a bit of a leading question here, but quite a contradiction of how media have dealt with other MPs who have been accused of things? We had Andrew Bailey recently around how he touched a staff. We had obviously Sam Uffindell accused of what he did when he was 16, and a host of other topics. Is there a double standard or a hypocrisy in play here?
Both. It's just really sad that, and very obvious that the media, whenever, these people are caught, no decency at all. And, when people are caught with their pants down, then the media just goes silent or paint them as victims, which is what they've done. And I don't understand why people will vote for Green after all of this, because they're either caught stealing clothes or lying, and now sexual perversion. And, I just don't understand what's going on. But I mean, it's really obvious, as Michael has said, that the media is just standing hand in hand with them. And I think Winston Peters is right. They're just a whole bunch of Marxists pushing for the mutilation of kids and the youth. And this guy, I have no idea what he's talking about, but that people will give him airtime.
So if I might ask, just a quick follow-up, you feel that Winston's doing the right thing, advocating this and actually front-footing it, unlike any other politicians actually in Parliament?
Yeah, I mean, thank God for Winston to stand up and speak out. And I'm just asking, where's everybody else? Why are they so silent with the media? But absolutely grateful that Winston is standing up and calling it out. Yeah.
So I'm keeping my focus on the mainstream media because, as I say, firstly, there's these allegations on Benjamin Boyle, and we want answers to that. But it is extraordinary how mainstream media, by and large, is silent, and yet at the same time we have stories about the dangers of emojis linked to a current Netflix series called Adolescence. We have almost day after day coverage of Alison Mao, actually, and it's lovely, well, not lovely, but appropriate for her sharing concerns around abuse. And yet at the same time, the same editors will not touch this case. Are they deliberately blind, or can they just not see?
Simon, can I just come in there? I just think back to the Posey Parker case, of course, and how they treated that. And I can still see it sort of haunts me, really. Simon Dallow, night after night, prefacing whatever he says about the actual event that she spoke at by calling her a controversial anti-trans activist. Now, that was the lead-in. So there's never going to be any objectivity, is there? And they've been pushing that line for a very long time. I mean, look at Seven Sharp with the drag queen or drag king or whatever he was. They gave him, 15 minutes of very favourable airtime. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Radio New Zealand, News Talk ZB, the list goes on, and all the main newspapers. So it's a pretty consistent, supportive message for all this stuff. And I agree, Arte, it's really good to see Winston stepping up and calling it for what it is, because I think he is a mouthpiece for many people, ordinary New Zealanders. So good on him.
So, Sue, how do we keep this, or how do we, and not just the five of us tonight, but how do those who are concerned about this story and the well-being of children keep the story alive? Is there any hope? Are we completely reliant on the mainstream media? I mean, how are we going to make sure that accountability is had here?
I think it showed that mainstream media were out of step and out of touch with public feeling of all this, and undermined the anger. And if we can remember that Simon Dello was actually married to Alison Moore, and her new book is out this week, and sexual abuse is very serious. And I think that this is actually a matter of urgency to go to the police to investigate the allegations. I will confirm these are allegations. But on another side, I learned a whole new vocabulary. I learned things that I probably didn't really want to. I pride myself, in the true sense of the word, not in the
good pun. Well played. Well played.
I pride myself in being up with a lot of knowledge. But I tell you what, I had my eyes opened and to understanding what emojis were and all this sort of thing in the last week. And frankly, my anger really reached a new threshold. And we can refer to them as allegations, but where's the urgency to refer this? Where is the urgency? Ironically, that on the Monday was Trans Visual Awareness Day, when Chloe and Marama were on the tiles in Parliament defending the whatever Benjamin Doyle, the allegations. Whole lot of questions there. And yes, thank you for Winston Peters for bringing it to the light. But the fact that these allegations were around for a very long time, no one seems to be doing anything. The push for urgency and the almost dismissiveness of the seriousness of these allegations. This is no laughing matter. It's no. I just am lost in the whole. I'm bewildered as to why media would be in alliance like that. And as Bob pointed out, within an hour, they all had the same sort of stories flying out. But I think that just showed them up to be be just useless in this. And we were able to, in other platforms, we were able to see the true story. And other people have kept that story going and, keep putting it out there, because if there are people affected, if investigations show that people have been harmed in these in actions, then that's very serious. And there's going to be a lot of questions to be answered as to why the media gave a wide berth to this story.
Well, totally. And look, if I might, and then I'm going to set up a little bit of context for you, Peter. I mean, you'll know it already, but I mean, first and foremost, if I might, Sue, it's children, potentially. This is a child safeguarding issue. And as a very quick context, before I put the questions, and it will be two questions to Peter. Obviously, Benjamin Doyle avoided Parliament last week. Parliament sits this week and then goes into a 3-week recess. So the first question for you, Peter, is do you expect, with your media and journalist experience, that Doyle will turn up to Parliament this week? And secondly, how is this, and I'm not even sure how to even phrase the question, this double standard, this hypocrisy to me appears in media, because they have taken over the years delight, and it's my choice of words, delight in haranguing MPs for the slightest infraction, and yet here they appear silent. So any reflections you can share with us, and including the first question, do you expect Doyle to turn up this week, would be very welcome.
I would be very surprised if Doyle is back this week. The excuse for him staying away is pathetic, by the way. There are these immense death threats against him, we are told. Does that mean an immense number of death threats? Or is the death threat particularly gruesome? Either way, one threat has been reported to police, so that tells us that there's really only been the one death threat. So therefore, it's probably not as serious as the Greens and Mr. Doyle would have us believe. As far as mainstream media is concerned, you talk about Andrew Bailey. What about Tim Jago? He and the ACT Party and David Seymour, we got wrapped up in that pretty quickly too, didn't he? The media never stopped campaigning about that, even though Jago had been convicted and was well and truly out of the ACT picture. The man who really did all the work on this story and told the media about it was this unknown ex-poster called Holy Heka Tui Teka. I don't know who Holy Heka Tui Teka is. Apparently, he has appeared anonymously on the platform, but he was the one who discovered these social media accounts and told everybody about it in the mainstream media a couple of months ago. Winston was the one in the end who picked up the ball and rolled with it. But the excuses that were trotted out a week ago today for the mainstream media, frankly, I just find pathetic. Audrey Young in the New Zealand Herald writing a column saying, well, we heard the allegations and we asked questions, but nobody would give us any answers, so therefore we couldn't write anything. I mean, dear me, you can background the whole story and say there was no comment from the Greens. It's a very simple thing to do. In other words, they wanted the story to go away. They didn't want to report it. It wasn't until what you might call alternative media, such as the platform RCR, Family First, and in particular Ian Wishart at The Centrist, started doing some serious work about it, that the mainstream media really had to pay attention. So good work for the alternative media. And once again, the mainstream media found absolutely wanting. It's just, as I think I said in a Substack, another very good reason why Jim Grennan should become chair of the board at NZME and start changing the editorial direction at the New Zealand Herald. One final comment I'll make about it, and I've at times really admired David Seymour, but this morning I heard him talking on the platform and he referred to Benjamin Doyle, who is a male, a man. He referred to Benjamin Doyle as they. And I thought, dear me, if the leader of the ACT Party is now beginning to buy into that pronouns nonsense, we've gone too far down a path that I don't want to follow as far as the ACT Party is concerned. So I give you a down tick on that, Mr. Seymour. I'm sorry.
Again, as a comment from my side with all my political biases, but I find it sad and frustrating that those on the libertarian side feel enchained to actually fall into that line. Although sad to say, it was the ACT Party that changed effectively, or pushed the change for birth certificates, Peter, that you now can effectively self-identify on a birth certificate. So there's this funny contradiction in play. And I mean, just as an observation very quickly to viewers and listeners, I remember in my time in Parliament, MPs for far lesser allegations, not even criminal allegations, literally being chased through the precinct by journalists who just would not let go of the story. And so I just find it extraordinary that nothing is happening now. And maybe if I could just quickly come back to you, Peter, is this the extraordinary power of identity politics or editorial control at play?
I think it's editorial control. And the editorial control is not with the editors. It's from the journalists on the ground and the generation of journalists. And I think you'll be well aware, Simon, from your time there, that parliamentary press gallery, hunters a pack. There's not too much in the way of independent thought there, is there? Apart from maybe old tuskers like Bazza Soper.
Yes. Or even Richard Harman, if I might, yeah.
Yeah, but everybody else is of a certain generation. Or Harman's an old lefty anyway, so he's going to fall into line pretty quickly on this. But it's very sad what has gone down as far as the media reporting of this case is concerned. But I just don't see things changing unless there's some change in ownership of some media companies. It looks like parts of Stuff are going to be picked up, or the Stuff digital is going to be picked up by Trade Me, and we know what's possibly in the wind at NZME. So a couple of significant moves in that respect, but I guess those are topics for another day.
And we'll definitely look forward to discussing them. I'm fascinated of the huge pushback by what some people refer to as the blob, trying to protect against any changes. Something slightly, and I stress the word slightly lighter, school lunches. School lunches have been in the news a lot, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this with the panel, but we were delving into some poll results recently, which were asking, and we've got some stats here, I'll pop up on the screen. Long and short, we all know about the debacle or otherwise around school lunches. But the polling here suggested that about 61, almost 62% of parents believe that they are actually the primary responsible people to feed children. And here's the kicker, and I'd love the panel's input on this. The lower the socioeconomic demographic, so to put it quite crudely, the poorer the family responding was, the more likely, repeat, more likely they were to say, actually, it's the parents' responsibility to feed their children. It seems, if you were to put it in reverse to all of you, the wealthier families who could afford lunches seem to be far more socialistic, believing that the state should step in. So, Sue, do you find this surprising? Is the result something you would have expected?
Possibly a surprise. I would sum it up very simply, that it absolves parents of or voters of guilt, that somehow kids in their class are going without lunch. If the government put their socialist application on it, that absolves my guilt. So that was my simple summary of it. And we've always promoted independence with our children, and we want competent children, and we want capable children, and I think that goes across all the different social strata and classes of society. But I just as I thought about this, I could only just come down to, I think it's just absolving them of guilt.
What about yourself, Peter? Were you surprised at the results? Are you surprised that it's not really being discussed outside of, pretty much the panel here tonight?
No, I wasn't surprised by the results at all, because I know a lot of families who struggle economically, a lot of families, not all of them, of course, but they make caring for their children their top priority, and a lot of parents work really hard for that. The staggering thing, again, is that although it was reported ever so briefly, there was not much of a song and dance about it. And I think even over the weekend, or was it Friday, there was yet another story about some plastic melting in a heated school lunch. And that was a story where the source was inevitably Radio New Zealand. I mean, that newsroom just cannot help itself, can it? Even when their own survey, tells them that people don't care and that parents should be making lunches anyway.
I think you're very generous to call it a newsroom, but anyway, we'll leave that to the side. Arte, were you surprised at this?
I don't believe this poll. I expect the number to be, I think 2/3 is seen low. I think if they were polling mainly parents and caregivers, I think the number will be higher. So I'm just interested in that 1/3, whether they have children. So that's my thought.
What about you, Mark? Do you think, like Arte, do you think the poll's too low? Is this a funny situation where the richer someone is, the more they want to indulge socialism?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, have we lost Michael?
Oh, sorry, Simon. Sorry.
Sorry.
I've been listening intently. Look,
Well, you win 10 out of 10 for attentiveness. This is good.
Okay. Look, since 1877, almost 100, plus years ago, I mean, since the birth of state schooling, I think it's been an assumption that parents will provide lunches, and all of us here and many, many other generations had that. That was just what was done. And so this idea is a political football. It's one that we know David Seymour's inherited. He's not really interested in it. I was going to say he doesn't have the stomach for it. Maybe that's not the right thing to say. But
we are full of puns tonight. I'm loving this panel.
Yeah. And look, why do the rich support socialism? I mean, it's a good question, Simon, but there are many champagne socialists who like the idea, as they're sipping their Chardonnay in their very comfortable plush houses, they like the idea of some sort of identification with the so-called marginalized and disenfranchised. But it's essentially an idea. And all through, the old Labour Party, and I suppose what do you mean by the old Labour Party? But the old sort of Federation of Labour, all one word, elbow round the wrong way. Remember that? Sort of the old time socialists. They were workers, but modern socialists are not. So no, I'm not really surprised by that, because I think modern socialists, we'll call them champagne socialists, they just love the ideas of identifying with the down and out. But those people on the, people who are struggling, you get more common sense out of them. They know that they're supposed to provide for their kids, most of them. So I'm not really surprised at all, Simon.
Well, another thing that probably will not surprise the panel is around GP waiting times. And Arte, as probably anticipated, I'm going to put you on the spot. And primarily, I'll then turn it over if the other panelists want to have a say on this as well. So most of the pressure's on you, Arte. But recent reportings indicated a survey about 1,000 people. I'll just read my notes here if people are wondering why I'm looking down. And, by the way, to our wonderful viewers and listeners, you have overwhelmed my system. There are so many comments coming through my cell phone on lunches and the Benjamin Doyle that I can't get to them all. So you're not forgotten. But coming back to GP waiting times, a poll in April says 1 in 3 people are waiting more than 2 weeks to see their general practitioner or GP, while 1 in 6 wait up to 3 or 4 weeks. Arte, obviously you're at the front line, and I'm not expecting you to speak on behalf of all and everyone, but is this reflective of what is happening at the moment within general practice from what you understand and see?
Yeah, absolutely. It is really sad that healthcare in New Zealand is almost is worse than third world. To have people wait, so many people are waiting 6 to 8 weeks, and that's just dangerous. And this is it's been a number of systemic issues, but I think since the pandemic, this is the legacy of Labour. It's just been really awful. People are, the GPs are burned out, and the midwives. And one of the sad things also is that our young graduate doctors, we spend the taxpayers' money educating our young doctors, and then they off across the Tasman. So we're losing our good, graduates. So, there's a whole heap of stuff that's going on, but hospital waiting lists are just off the charts. So, and then I think one of the other sad things, in the past, the young graduates will come through, finish their training, and then they'll buy GP practice. No one wants to buy a GP practice. They just, they just rather work as locum, more money and less responsibility. So there's just such a shift there. And it's really, it's sad. There had been, I think when Labour, before the pandemic, they had allocated money to help the GPs, and then all that money went to the media to help Jacinda to do her narrative. I mean, that's the most disgusting thing. I mean, they promised the GPs to give them, some pay rise and just to help them. And then all that money went to the media. And so, I can go on, but I better stop there.
Before I turn, I'm not going to go to every panelist. So just as a heads up to Sue, Michael, and Peter, if you have something you want to say, just shout in a moment. I just want to address Stacey on the chat. This is granted about school lunches, but I thought said something quite profound. She says, "What's happened to community? Once upon a time, a community took care of each other. Gosh, I've sent many a school lunch along to school for my children's classmates." And Stacey, if I'm reading and understanding you correctly, in many ways, again, it's the question of why should the state be always stepping in when actually, if it's not just families, that, immediate community which can help. But turning back to GPs, do any of the other panelists have any insights or thoughts they want to share? Peter's got a hand up. Go for it.
Yes, well, obviously, I live in a part of the country where we're either very healthy or we have plenty of doctors, because the stories that Ate has told us, and then the experiences that have come to light through that survey, just do not apply in the place that I go to the doctor, which is in Cromwell, about 20 minutes drive from me. I can ring up at 9 o'clock in the morning and often get an appointment that day, almost always get one the next day. And these are not for urgent matters. The medical practice, I think, only has 2 full-time doctors. When I say full-time, there seems to be, and Ate can comment perhaps a bit more on this, there seems to be down in this part of the world a tendency for doctors to be what you might call lifestyle doctors. If they work 3 days a week, they've put in a good week. There's not too many full-time GPs down here. But what I do see, who I do see quite often, are nurse practitioners. And we have 2 very good ones at the Cromwell Medical Centre. Now, Ate can tell us what kind of training they've had, but they can issue prescriptions. And in terms of the non-urgent matters that I've had to see a GP about, I'm more than happy to see a nurse practitioner. There's a couple of them there that I say that appear very competent and can address my issues very well. So experiences at the Cromwell Medical Centre, certainly nothing like what Ate has told us and what the survey is telling us.
In some ways, perhaps, again, me inserting myself into the conversation again, hashtag bring back Bob. It's that postcode lottery, which actually, to be fair, my Labour colleagues talked about in the past. That, or everyone's now going to turn up to Cromwell, Peter, and you're going to find it's going to take you a little bit longer.
Yeah, true. We're good at the GPs, but we're not too flash on the hospitals. If you've got a hospital issue, a serious issue, it's a 3-hour drive to Dunedin, although Dunstan is very good for outpatient treatment.
And really quickly for people, a nurse practitioner, if anyone's wondering, is effectively a nurse, but they have prescribing abilities. As you know, at the moment, if you go to a nurse in general, they cannot prescribe pharmaceuticals. That's a very, very quick way of understanding it. Can I turn us to something completely different? And I want to stress that Bob put this into the list, not me, despite my interest in things defence. But it's the final topic for tonight, because actually polls are saying that New Zealanders want to see more taxpayer money being put into defence spending. At the moment, we are just under 1% of GDP, and they were asked, should we spend more? And 50% said yes, just over 30% said no, and 70% didn't know. But guys, we have clearly a changing environment out there at the moment. We all know about the Chinese warships going through the Tasman Sea, uninvited. We have perception, certainly in New Zealand, of who's friend and foe, be it China, the US, Russia, and otherwise. But importantly, today, we had a defence capability plan put out by the government. And just for viewers to understand, this literally came out in the last few hours, so we're all here on the panel grappling with it. But the government's come out today and saying they're going to spend up to $12 billion, so not million, but $12 billion over the next 4 years to try and lift our defence spending from pretty much 1% to 2%. Saying there's a whole lot of capabilities. This is on top of course, on Friday, and Peter in particular coming out of media will understand this, politicians love to drop bad news on a Friday. The report on the sinking of His Majesty's ship, New Zealand ship Manawanui, the hydrographic vessel, there we go, sitting at the bottom of the ocean, because as the report has indicated, the captain and crew basically drove it on to the reef. And I don't know if you can read this as a panel or those viewing, but at the bottom part of, look, to summarize long and short, it says the captain was not trained to be in command of the ship. So if I could put it this way, and we might start with you, Michael, to throw you in the deep end, a very bad nautical pun. The Navy, I'm sorry to pick on the Navy, the senior service, but literally their commanders have sunk a sixth of our fleet. We don't spend a lot into this space. The government's talking a big game about spending. Is this where the priority should be? Or put another way, Michael, with all the needs at the moment, is this where the money should be going?
Well, Simon, civil society requires defence and protection of citizens. I would argue it's the first and most important duty of the state, because if you haven't got that, no other functions of government and society can actually happen. So internally, we need a strong police force, and externally, at least theoretically, we need to be able to repel an aggressor. And but we have certain disadvantages. I mean, for a long time, we've felt we've been under the ANZUS umbrella. Well, that's gone. We felt perhaps our isolation from major world powers has helped us. But we also, Simon, have an enormously big and exposed coastline. And as Judith Collins said tonight on the TV, that, we can no longer just rely on these things as we have in the past, and technology changes so quickly, of course. So look, I would be in favour of this. I mean, in an ideal society, I think as Chloe Swarbrick said tonight, we should be spending it on peace and climate change, or maybe in an ideal world. But of course, Chloe needs constant reminders that we don't live in an ideal world, and that we need to be responsible citizens with our allies. And so no longer ANZUS, Simon, but the AUKUS thing is there for debate. But I would argue that, yes, we need to do this. What sort of capability and capacity we could have, I don't know. But, it is a substantial amount of spending, isn't it? But, a $103 million vessel is now at the bottom of the reef in Samoa. So we're starting on the back foot, really. It's not good. And I think, recent governments, and you can perhaps comment on this, given your experience, but, defence hasn't been prioritised for ideological and other reasons. But I just come back to my first point, that it is the first and most important duty of the state to protect its citizens. How much we could actually do that with all this investment, I don't know. But at least we're seen to be doing something, and our defence forces have, I think, been very run down, Simon.
Yeah, I won't comment at length because we'd be here all night and you'd be bored out of your brain. But Arte, we just talked about GP waiting times. There's clearly huge issues in health. Surely $12 billion would be better spent in the health space. There's a provocative question for you.
Of course, I said, please put the money into health and education. And I would also say, if with regard to health, cut down the money on abortion and, mutilating surgeries, and help our nurses and our midwives and our GP. Absolutely. My question is, where's the money going to come from? And are they going to deliver, or is it just a promise? Like so many promises that government has made, and doesn't, they don't deliver. And then if they're going to spend that money, are they going to have the same criteria? Like that woman with no accreditation just drive this $1 million, multi-million into the reef? Are they going to look at that? Or are we just going to continue with this rubbish, making room with the DEI and all of that?
So, Arte sort of stolen my thunder. I was going to ask you, where is the money coming from? And I'm not trying to exhibit a bias here, but I mean, the economy doesn't seem in great shape to me. Do you think we can afford this? Is it the appropriate spend given all the other elements which are in play?
If we don't spend it, then we won't have an economy to defend. I will always sit in the place of to have more than adequate and policy support of our military and defence forces, because I have a husband who served, a brother-in-law who served, and a daughter currently serving. So I am very strong about military and defence, and I think it's essential. It's an essential part. We have to play our part however we can. In AUKUS, somehow we need to be in on that, that to side with the bigger players like Australia and the USA. Basically, the USA equals Western civilization. So we're not only defending our country, we're defending a whole lot of our values and our economy and our ideals. With Anzac Day coming up, it couldn't be more huge message to our defence force, which the low morale can be there, and they have had low morale. So, but it's that money, wherever it comes from, wherever they are managing to bring it from, is actually a rebuild. Because when you look at the history, Helen Clark is a great example. Her statement, sometime in the 90s, I looked it up, and she said, there are no threats to New Zealand in this post-Cold War era. So that turned out to be naive and foolish. And in a nanosecond, the temperature can change. And we have a threat. We have a very real threat from China, and that would be our greatest threat. We're isolated in this big ocean, and we have to play our part. And I'll always come from that angle. So it's a rebuild. When you remember that in 1999, Helen Clark cancelling the Skyhawks, and you not only lose equipment, you lose experience, and you lose staff. And a lot of that is long gone. And one layer has gone. Even the Air Force, I don't even know whether we've got capacity now. I have to recheck that. But you lose this incredible experience. And now we've got another layer, and it's why you saw the Manawanui go down, because you have someone who was there who shouldn't have been there operating a ship. And what if there had been loss of life? They got out of that very, very, just miraculous that no life was lost. So that was irresponsible. But you're not only rebuilding equipment and what we need for our place in the world, you are having to rebuild the experience and the staff. So it's a big number, but we've had deficits, and both parties have done it for decades throughout their when they've been in positions of power.
In their tenure.
It needs to get in there, and we need to rebuild it. And I'll always back my defence force.
I'm with you before we come to Peter with the rebuild. I remember before I finished as the Chair of Foreign Affairs and Defence, I went back to Waiouru, and the officers' mess that I'd been in years before as a padre, non-commissioned, I better quickly add, but long and short, nothing had changed. Even the prices at the bar, that part I was quite happy with. But that's a separate story for another night and not been recorded. Peter, you've been around the media and political traps. Is this all sizzle with no steak? I'm going to phrase it that way, because is this just the government making a big announcement because none of this money's appropriated, none of it's actually been authorised? Is this just a big announcement which won't be delivered, or do you think this is actually going to make a difference?
Well, it's such a long time frame too. Who is going to be the government in 2032? I mean, we're talking 7 years out. So how many elections before then? We're going to have 26, 29 and an election in 32. So they're talking $12 billion. This has got all the hallmarks, as the National Party used to say, of Labour's time in power, of an announcement of an announcement. It reminded me actually of Grant Robertson's infamous $1.9 billion for mental health in the wellbeing budget of 2019, not all of which, of course, has seen the light of day, and that which has seen the light of day has been particularly ineffective. It really is an announcement to say to our so-called allies, I guess we're talking Australia, the US, UK, our Five Eyes partners, that we're going to take defence a bit more seriously. $12 billion is not going to defend this country from an invasion because we have such a big coastline that if somebody wanted to invade New Zealand, they would be able to do so very quickly. But thankfully, we are unlikely to ever have that happen to us in our lifetime. So it's good noise. I think it's more about international diplomacy more than about reality. But the statement has been made. And as far as the money's concerned, well, it hasn't been appropriated. We have a $17 billion deficit in this year's budget. The deficits are not expected to move to surplus until at least 2030. So we just do not have the money. And frankly, I don't see much of it being spent in the next 5 years. They might have to come home with a hiss and a roar in 31 and 32 if they're going to actually do what they're promising now.
In what is going to be a terrible segue, hashtag bring back Bob, I'm going to move from defence spending to defending the family. So here's a couple of quick previews before we wrap up the show of the upcoming Forum on the Family.
Hi, I'm Dr. Miriam Grossman. I am a child and adolescent psychiatrist. I'd written a book called Lost in Trans Nation, a child psychiatrist's guide out of the madness. And I wrote the book after having seen in my private practice hundreds of families dealing with the issue of having a gender confused child or young adult and helping them to navigate that issue. So I discuss this and many other things in my book, and I will be talking about many of those things when I see you again in August.
Hi, I'm Kira Lee Smith from binary.org.au, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you at Forum on the Family in 2025. I'll give you an update on all my legal cases. I've been in court 8 times for identifying males in female sports. We've written a book documenting the accounts of 9 families, one from New Zealand, who have been totally and utterly destroyed by gender ideology. And I'll give you an update on upcoming campaigns.
Miriam and Kiralee are just some of our guests. In fact, I did a podcast with Kiralee a few weeks ago. You can find that on the Family First Facebook page or on YouTube. She's amazing. As I say, save the date. And look, guys, obviously Bob is away. That's why I'm in the hot seat. Look, know that over the coming days, we're going to still be continuing our programs. I'll be doing Solid Ground again tomorrow. Bright and early, bushy-tailed even, Tuesday morning and Thursday. But just a heads up that we will not be doing, and Bob will not be doing Daybreak on Wednesday and Friday. So we had something this morning. I hosted Daybreak. We'll be there again on Tuesday and Thursday, but you can all take a break. Just enjoy your coffee and quiet on Wednesday and Friday. Importantly, though, and I think excitingly, maybe for me, that Peter might disagree, but Peter and I will be hosting Political Playback on Thursday. That's from 5 p.m., just like this, live across social media. We'll be talking a lot of the political issues of the day, and there are no shortage. So join Peter and I then. Finally, before I thank the panelists, to all of you who are online, thank you for all the comments. There are so many of them. You've overwhelmed me in both senses of the word, but I look forward tomorrow to jumping online and responding. So thank you for all your comments there. And to our wonderful, wonderful panelists, to Sue, to Arte, to Michael and Peter, it's been great having you on board. Thank you for your insights. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the evening. And from all of us to you viewing, good night.
Yeah.